Welcome to Sectra's financial report presentation with CEO Torbjörn Kronander and CFO Mats Franzén. My name is Helena Pettersson and I will be the moderator of the Q&A session after management presentation. The chat function is open and you are welcome to start writing your questions. If you don't see the chat function, it is on the top of your screen. It's a speech bubble with a question mark in it. If you don't see it, you may need to switch to full width mode on your screen. And with that, I leave the word to Torbjörn Kronander.
All right, welcome to our presentation of first half year. It's myself, Torbjörn Kronander, CEO. And Mats Franzén, our CFO, who sits here to the right of me. And then we'll go to the presentation. 6-month interim report. Agenda today is Q2 highlights. That will be done by me. Financial development done by Mats. Sectra's way forward done by me. And finally, we'll have a Q&A session. As Helena said before, you can either send email or you can use the chat function in the Teams meeting. And we also have some pre-sent in emails that Helena will read when we have the session. The value we create for customers, etc. We are working in 3 areas. All are important for society and they have the benefits, or 2 major areas, I would say, medical and cybersecurity. Both have the benefits that these areas will have to grow, and we have the basic idea that it's easier to grow in growing markets. And as we are presented in other presentations available on the net, both medical and cybersecurity has to grow in external forces, and that's where we operate. Q2 highlights. We have our net sales. We had an extremely good first quarter. We also told very early on at that presentation that some of these were deliveries made earlier and that level was not to be expected for the full year. And that is also what we're seeing now. The net sales was increased by 15.7% over the 6 months. Profit per share increased by 53%. And the recurring revenue, which is a very important figure now, it must be made aware of that our change to software as a service model will change how the orders are delivered. We still get large orders, but recurring revenue is what we think is a very important growth factor now. While the top line revenue, as we spread this income of a license out over future years instead of the present year, will not grow as much as the underlying business growth. Now, for shareholders, it will be long-term a good thing, but it will not look like the mix. The mix will not look as it has been doing historically. All our financial targets for the group are fulfilled. Our first target is stability. We are dealing in markets where trust is super important. If our systems stop in hospitals, the entire hospital stops. And if our system doesn't work in cybersecurity, the most important secrets of nations are compromised. We cannot operate in such an area without trust. And that also goes for financial trust. We should have a strong financial situation that is expressed by equity to assets ratio, which should always be above 30%, and we are currently at 61.3%. Good margin to the 30. Profitability, that's a hygiene measure as we see it. Our target is to be above 15%. Now, cost of the pandemic has been much lower than normal. We are seeing these costs coming back though. We need to go to exhibitions, and we just recently participated in the first international exhibition in 2 years, which was the RSNA in Chicago. And we see some of these costs coming back. So the target is still to keep it above 15%, but we're currently clearly above that at 23.3%. And then the most important target, which is profit growth, per share over 5 years. That should be above 50%, and we are currently well above that at 134.8. That is the most important target, though it's rated rank number 3 in priority. Seasonal effects and the pandemic. We have large variations between quarters. Some of these are due to the pandemic. Countries open up and they lock down and we can't travel, and this affects us a lot, and especially it affects our customers in healthcare and our delivery possibilities in cybersecurity. We need all business negotiations at the highest level of security needs to be done in person. It cannot be done over net, and all deliveries in this category are done by courier. If you cannot travel, you cannot deliver. And in medical, if there is a situation with virus situation, the thing you shut down or close down in order to open up to be more prepared for handling the pandemic has been this elective surgeries or elective procedures, things that are not acute. They have decreased, and some of our business areas, especially orthopedics, have been affected because they deal exactly with elective surgery. It's gradually coming back, and of course, people who need new prosthesis, etc., they have not gone away. So this is a pent-up, a increased workload ahead of us. We don't know what the impact that will be, but it has affected us historically here over the pandemic. Travel and marketing costs will increase post-pandemic, but we do not think that they will go back to historic levels. The days when you did a trip to another country for a 2-hour meeting of people you already know are probably and hopefully over, and that will increase efficiency, and some of that travel will not come back as we see it today. Secure communications, Q2 highlights. The Norwegian Defence Forces procured additional units of our Sectra S, Tiger S. That's our most qualified mobile encryption system. Is a mobile phone that we build ourselves. It's approved to the secret level in NATO and EU and Sweden and Netherlands. Not Sweden yet, but Netherlands. And then we have had problems mainly due to COVID, but also quite a lot of investments in the communications area, and we are working to increase this to more normal levels for Sectra. Our growth initiatives in Sectra Communications, mobile secure workplaces. That's a very interesting area. It was already coming before the pandemic, and now it's even more important. People want to be working from remote, but they want to be on a secure network, as secure as if they had been on the physical cable in the office. This is a growing area, also on the level of qualified, secret and restricted information, and we are very well positioned in that area. So it's not only voice, it's the entire mobile workplace. Critical infrastructure, there has been some significant events, not the least the Colonial Pipeline in the US, the east of US during the spring. We had increased awareness that we have built a very vulnerable society, and critical infrastructure must be protected against cybercrime. We are well positioned there, and that's a growing area where we're investing right now. Highest security levels for secure mobile voice and network systems. As I said before, this is work areas where we've been working in for many years and are very well positioned. We also have high-speed network encryption systems, and then we mean on the approved level. So level 2, level 3, and level 4 network devices that are very high speed, but on the approved security levels. We have Simo Pykälistö, who's been with Sectra for 18 years, first as CFO and then managing communications, has unfortunately decided to leave Sectra for another opportunity. And we are currently have an interim manager in place, Magnus Brege, who has a history as managing directors for various companies. He will formally take over that role January 1st, but he's already here. And we are looking for a new permanent manager during the early spring business innovation Q2 highlights. We had an interest in the education area. We just got our first install in the US or in Norway, where we got the honor of delivering our education portal to Oslo Metropolitan University for Medical Education. That's the first in Norway. In orthopedics, we won a very prestigious award. We won the best software for post-operative follow-up with a Sectra implant movement analysis to see if prostheses are really working or if they should be reoperated. And we also have seen a strong negative effect from pandemic effects, as both of these areas, but especially in orthopedics. Growth initiatives in business innovation. We have in medical education, we are transitioning from a device delivery of our large tables for a medical education used to replace the autopsies more or less for students, that we are now have so much content that we're beginning to also sell content subscriptions. This is a very large change. We get recurring revenue. As with all parts of Sectra, we're moving this area heavily into recurring revenue. We are selling a larger proportion of recurring revenue in teaching all the time. And we also seen during pandemic that people are doing more and more education from remote, and that has also sped this up. We have new areas within orthopedics, Sectra implant movement analysis, as said before. This is in order to determine which patients should be reoperated. This is when patients have already an implant and they have problems or pain, they come back, and very often it's reoperated. A revision of a prosthesis is a dangerous operation, and it's also very expensive, much more so than the first prosthesis. And to avoid the ones that could be avoided because it's actually not the problem with the prosthesis is important. That has been very difficult to do, and we have a new technology, Sectra implant movement analysis, that originally developed at the Karolinska Institute of Stockholm, that we're now having a lot of clinical trials, and we also use it in clinical use in some countries all over the world. A variation of that is also more or less the same software, but used not for a patient, but to evaluate new prostheses, to see if a prosthesis are actually staying at the place you insert in the body or if it moves. There, the customers are prosthesis manufacturers who need a research tool to see if the prosthesis work or not. And in research, which is the third area of business innovation, we are doing a lot of work in AI for medical applications, and we're also looking into future application areas of various kinds. Imaging IT solutions are our largest area. Q2 highlights, we are seeing cloud-based deliveries are increasing. In Sweden, all the latest installs have been cloud delivered on our private cloud. But we also see an increasing interest, especially in the US, for public cloud. That is when Microsoft or Azure or Google host our applications. And we have now joined an international partnership with Microsoft on our increasingly delivering our applications in the Microsoft cloud. Very good collaboration, and that can be important for the future, or will be important for the future. In Europe so far, we have done private cloud because of GDPR reasons. We cannot use the Microsoft cloud in Europe yet. We hope to be able to do it soon. And we also see our customer base growing. We have a good, healthy growth, especially in the number of exams we handle in our systems. As I said before, with cloud deliveries, recurring revenue is more important than actually the top line revenue, because when we sell the license over time, it will affect the immediate sale after getting an order. Our growth initiatives in imaging IT solutions, we are looking into new markets. We are just opened our first partnership in South America. that cannot be, that will not be super large, but it's an interesting step into new continent. Enterprise imaging, we are doing a lot of work in a system that is more or less parallel to the medical record systems, handling all images of hospitals. And we are, as we have announced before, we are growing very well in digital pathology, where we are definitely one of the world leaders, and integrated diagnostics, where you combine pathology and radiology, especially for cancer diagnosis. We are increasing in cardiology, also using a lot of images. And we have a new area, ophthalmology, developed together with a very important customer in the US, which is now in clinical use and will be another important addition to our enterprise imaging. We are focusing on the US, that's the world's largest market, with top customer satisfaction, which we are very, very proud of. We have had the happiest customer in the US for 8 years in a row. And we still have a small but growing market share in some other countries where we also have very happy customers. We have a very large market share that will be difficult to grow, but in the US, we are still not a very large player. And then I'll leave the word to Mats, who will discuss the financial developments.
Yes. Okay, so starting with the order intake, we see the same pattern as we did in the first quarter. We are down some the first 6 months with some 37%, and I think it was 37.5% in the second quarter. This means that we're on a rolling 12 now, are at 2.1 billion to 2,150 million to be more exactly, which is down 19% compared with the 2.6 billion we had for last financial year. The net sales is up some 16%. That was accomplished primarily in the very strong first quarter, which those of you who have followed us know is due to a temporal situation where we had order deliveries or deployments coming earlier for various reasons, which also then we said, and we still say, do not impact the way how we view things going forward. We do have a slight adverse currency situation, so 17.4% would have been the performance so far. Currency neutral, especially the US dollar has appreciated in relation to the Swedish, or the Swedish krona has grown stronger rather. However, now we have seen that reversed over the last 6 weeks or so. We can go to the next slide, which is me. Sorry for that. When it comes to sales by geographic market, we do have a strong performance in the US continued, and in Sweden is the only market actually where we have a contraction for the first 6 months, and that is primarily due to communications side. The rest of Europe is also the second largest contributor, where actually about half of that is Norway, and then we have Belgium and Germany comprising the lion's share of the residual. And as for the rest of the world, which also had quite a good traction during the first 6 months, we see that it's pretty much evenly split between Canada and Australia. So looking at the performance in terms of segments, it is quite clear from this picture that it's imaging IT solution, which is the big contributor here, and secure communication has had a rough patch for the first 6 months in terms of revenue developments, and that's pretty much the big picture here that we can see. In terms of earnings, we also see that the volume base increase in imaging IT has clearly also reflected in the earnings or the profit numbers. We do have a somewhat stronger gross margin, although we don't report that on a separate line item, but that's primarily due to the fact that we do not have as much hardware and third-party products. It's less than 8% this second quarter, at least, and it was about 17% the comparable second quarter. We do, on the other hand, have an uptick in the cost now that we can see, and which we foresaw as well due to hopefully being able to visiting customers and being able to onboard more colleagues for the future. Other operation has a slightly higher cost increase presently as well due to IT, especially IT consultancy and projects going on to accommodate a higher volume. As for cash flow, obviously the operating profit is a good baseline to start with. We have had a good year so far in terms of operating profits. However, considerable part of this is not conversed really, as we had such a strong sales. We do have that capped in operating working capital, so to say, and we also have slightly higher investments. I would say this second quarter now being some just below the 50 million mark is pretty much the normal, or the historically is it actually 19 and 20, which is the odd year with this above 100 million. But looking to more years back, it's around 50 million in cash flow in this second quarter. So that's not outside the normal. Okay, back to you, Torbjörn.
All right, and I will continue with Sectra's way forward as we plan and look for it. Focus forward will be continuously to have high work for higher customer satisfaction or high customer satisfaction. That is kind of in our genes, and we have a very strong belief if you have happy customers, which requires happy employees, then you will have profitable growth if you're working in markets that are growing, and that will be good for shareholders long term and very often short term also. And we also want to skate where the puck is going to be, as we are saying it. We are investing in things we believe will be important, not only next year, but 3 to 8 years out. And a very good example of that's digital pathology, where we saw this as an important growth field. That was the last area of medical imaging that was still not digital. We started up at a loss. It was lossy for several years. And we invested there, and today we are on a trajectory in a world leading position, or one of the world leaders in a completely new area that will spread all over the world. So that is how we operate. Some of these doesn't work out, then we have to shut them down, but we rather have a few that works out and gets us in the right position than not daring to take these investments at all. This is a quote that we very often use. Some of you who have heard us before have seen it before. That is, you can imagine a lot of things, but the world is not so different from the way it always have been. Profit in business comes from repeat customers that boast about your product or service and that bring friends with them. Old quote from Edward Deming, who was consultant for the Japanese state after the war. And this has been the rule for eternity, and it will be the rule going forward. It's also, but you should never ever forget it. You need to keep your current customers happy in order to get new ones. But in order to have happy customers, you need happy employees. Sorry for the misspelling there. That you cannot have happy customers unless if the employees are not happy. So we work a lot with employee satisfaction as well, and very happy to announce that we were voted by our own staff in anonymous votes to be the 4th best employer in all of Sweden. This is super important both for recruitment but also for our employees to do good work towards customers. Customers feel the attitude and the morale and the mentality in the company, and that affects very much the customer's impression of Sectra as a whole. Increasing recurring revenue, as was said before, this will be a increasing important goal for us to increase this. We have a large interest in pay per usage. We introduced last year a Sectra One model, and we see now that the interest in buying from customers in that way, where you buy for usage instead of the license, has increased tremendously. Actually, the norm of the discussions we're having with future customers right now is most often in this model than a license sale. A little different in Europe, where the way the European purchases work, that there's more license content here, but in the US, who are faster to move, we see a huge interest in Sectra 1. Transition to this new sales model will be over several years. And during the transition, as I said before, the apparent revenue growth top line will be significantly smaller, despite large growth in real usage. Real usage is actually what determines our long-term profitability more than anything else, especially if you get paid per usage, of course, but also generally. So our top line growth will be smaller, while the long-term profitability will be better than before. Coming out of this change of model, as you have seen in many other IT areas, other markets around us. Long term, the financial effects will be strongly positive if people pay per usage instead of paying for initial license. Skating with the puck is going to be future things we are working on in imaging IT systems is enterprise medical imaging, including pathology. Pathology is still in a very, very early market phase. It's a small fraction of the world's pathology departments are digital today, and we are very well positioned in that area. Also, healthcare is on a significant strain and pressure for production. There are too few medical doctors and medical staff all over the world compared to the inflow of patients, especially elderly patients. And the way to sell to these people is, of course, to improve the workflows and make them more effective, not only running faster, because that won't work. So we provide our medical customers with tools so they can be more efficient without working even more hours than they already do. Consolidated large-scale IT systems, there's a huge consolidation going on in the world between providers of healthcare, both in the public healthcare countries where you merge large groups and regionalize, but also in private systems where there's more mergers and acquisitions and some chains buy other hospitals. We are well positioned in that area. We have a very scalable IT systems. We see that very often we replace other vendor systems who did not scale. These providers, these healthcare providers, need systems that can grow with them without forklift upgrades, and we're strong in that area. In cybersecurity, high-speed, high-security networking infrastructure, that is approved network infrastructures. And of course, as all over the world, networking becoming more important, also in authorities, defenses, etc. But these people need high security networks that are approved to secret or restricted levels. This is a huge growth area, and we are well positioned with our new products. Secure mobile workplaces, people want or need to work from a remote. Not the least, this has been very obvious in the pandemic. People who sit on a closed down network with a cable that is orange or red, they need to be able to sit remote and be as secure. That requires very special security solutions, and what you normally can buy on the network as for VPNs, etc., are not appropriate for these needs for the high security levels, and we are good there, and we're increasing in that area. Secure mobile workplace will be a large area of growth in the future. And then, of course, safeguarding critical infrastructure, as we discussed before. Business innovation, the spare part human is becoming reality, especially for skeletal pieces. There are many, many tens of thousands of orthopedic devices you can actually insert into the human body. And these people will need more pre-operative planning to get the right device into the right people. But also, as we said before, revision should be avoided because they're very, very expensive and also very expensive. And our implant movement analysis is unique in that ability to avoid unnecessary revisions. And we also see in education, the lifespan of medical knowledge is getting shorter and shorter. What is state of the art was before 50 years, now it's perhaps 1 year. And then it's a lifelong education, not only of university studies students, but also existing medical staff. And we will have a very good internet-based business in providing content and curriculum for such training in the education area, a rapidly growing area as well. Our philosophy for shareholders, as I said before, is if you have happy customers, happy employees are needed to have the happy customers, a good position in growing markets, and especially if the market has to grow by external force, reasonable cost control and perseverance, you need to be a little stubborn at times, then shareholders will be happy. And I think we have proved that over the years, and we'll try to continue proving that. And that leads us to the end. Our upcoming financial reports and the AGM is now decided. The 9-month interim report will be March 9, 2022. The year-end report will be June 3rd, 2022. And our annual general meeting will hopefully, and the planning is that we will have it as a real life event. And now these virtual meetings are not very nice. It's not as nice as a real meeting. So the planning is for having a meeting in Linköping, as we've done historically, September 8th, 2022. I will remind you that your feedback on these presentations is important. Please let us know what you think. We try to adapt them to serve the needs of information from you shareholders and people who follow us on the net. So send an email to info@investor@sectra.com if you have any comments or any suggestions to improve these presentations. Then we open up for the questions, and you can also use the chat function. And Helena will read questions to me and to Mats, and then we will reply here.
Yes, and I will start with inviting our financial analyst Carl Norén from Danske Bank to start asking questions. And you are welcome to unmute your microphone. Are you there, Carl? Okay, then we will start with one question from the chat, and the question is, how will you present numbers during the transition period from license to SaaS? It would be helpful to have some sort of measure of underlying performance, as reported numbers will obviously be affected negatively.
We are currently reporting since a quarter or two back recurring revenue in a way we didn't do before. We are working on actually making that even more fine-grained, so you can see in detail how we proceed, and we look forward to making this report even more detailed in the future. Right now you have to look at the recurring revenue figures.
And then I will go on to read some questions from Christopher Liljeberg at Carnegie. And the first question is, can you please explain the sequentially higher gross margin in K2? Is it explained by a low number of new installations?
I would say, if I may take that one, primarily it's due to the significantly lower proportion of hardware and third-party content in the second quarter. It's below 8% compared with some 17% in the corresponding second quarter last year.
And the next question is, when commenting the growth for the first 6 months of the year in the report, it mentioned that growth was supported by early deliveries. Does this imply growth will be lower in second half than in first half?
That's a question we cannot reply to. We do not do forecasts, etc. So it's up to every analyst to interpret this themselves.
And the next question is, what was the organic figure for rolling 12-month order growth?
The total order intake, we do not separate organic or otherwise, is 2,150,000,000 compared with 2,652,000,000 for the last full financial years. That's on the level we report this.
And does operating cost in Q2 reflect business back to normal, or should we expect cost to continue increase sequentially?
We will increase costs still. All of the world is not open yet. So cost will be expected to increase a bit higher, but however, we don't think it will come back to pre-pandemic levels.
Okay, then we'll do a new try with Carl Norén. If you can unmute now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I have a couple of questions, but if we start off with secure communications, I was wondering if you can comment anything on the weaker development here in Q2. Is it only the pandemic, you would say, and when do you expect net sales to recover back? And any comments on the order intake would be helpful.
It's mainly due to the pandemic, because as we said, the national security area where we deliver these secret level devices, if we can't go to the customer, we can neither sell nor deliver our products. It's nothing like in medical, we can both sell and deliver over the network. It's not possible. You're not allowed to even discuss this over Teams, for instance. So after a while the pandemic decreases, we expect the order intake to rebound, and then of course it takes a little more time after order intake until you get revenue out of it. But we do expect a improvement when the pandemic lockdowns goes down.
Okay, and then maybe a question on the order intake in the IT imaging. I'm just wondering, when you move, as you say now, more into software as a service and pay-per-X and with Sectra One, can you just tell us a bit more on how we should think about the order book? Will that change anything of how you report the order intake, or will it be exactly the same as before?
Very often, customers, it's a little different in different countries. But if we take the US, which is currently our largest market, also where we're growing, as a prime, I will respond to that first. Then we normally get a fixed order when they guarantee to buy everything for us for a certain number of years in these orders. Now, of course, the order in reality is longer because it's also the order beyond this initial 4 or 5 years, where if the customers are happy, they will stay with us, but that's not visible in the order intake. It's not a guaranteed order. Then revenue recognition, unfortunately, varies quite a bit. If it's something where we're responsible for the entire delivery, we can count this upfront as a future income, and we can count that as revenue and profit upfront, though it's spread out cash flow wise over several years. If it's not completely depending on us, we need to take this revenue and profit each year by year. The order will be the same, but the outcome and revenue will be different. This is very unfortunate. We wish it was not the case, but that's an IFRS problem that we have to live with.
Okay, and then a question on the number of exams in your larger market, in your systems. You said that you have seen quite nice growth there, I think I heard. Can you say anything on how the recovery is looking? I guess the US is back to normal almost, but how is it looking in Europe and other markets?
The US is not back to normal, but it's interesting that this area of the market has been back, is more or less normal. It shows that the consolidation hospitals, etc., because of the financial strains of US healthcare, most of the income for US hospitals come from recurring or from elective procedures. And when you take that out, there's a massive impact that has increased the rate of consolidation in the US. So we don't see a large effect in the US, but the US is far from back to normal. As for the pandemic goes. In Europe, it's very, very different in different countries. As you know, I mean, Austria has a lockdown again. Germany is in between somewhere. The UK has as well introduced new restrictions, so as even Sweden. And it goes a little up and down. We do see business going on in Europe as well. But exactly what happens now with the Omicron mutation, we have no clue, to be frank, as I think no one else has. Otherwise, you need to be prepared. and be aware of that the predictability of the market is more difficult than it's normal.
Yes, thank you. And then just the last one on, you stated now on the recurring revenue side that this could impact revenue growth or will impact revenue growth. Could it be that it will be hard for you to reach your financial target of growing your EBIT with above 15% per year during this transition time, or do you still see that Sectra should be able to reach these targets?
Well, we haven't changed that target, neither up or down. You could consider that being above it for many times, it could be a reason up, but it will be impacted to some part by this. But long term, we think it will be better than if we didn't do the change to software as a service. But we are not. We are still having that target, and there is no big difference in our predictions of being able to reach it. Then I cannot give predictions any more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I see no further questions through the live event, but we have a number of questions that we have received by email before this meeting. And the first one, I think, is actually the one you answered right now. The financial targets are by far exceeded quarter after quarter and year after year. Are you having any discussion about updating the targets?
Of course, there are such discussions, as I said before, but we are in a transition that we think, as all other software markets are doing the same thing, as long term is good for both customers and vendor, which is kind of the best things you can have. But it may affect these figures. We don't know yet, but we are right now. The board has not decided to change them for the time being.
The margins were good in the first quarter, which I interpret was due to a higher percentage of sales of software. Will the higher operating margins as well as the share of software of total sales stay at current levels also in the future?
We cannot comment on that. We see with going into the cloud that the hardware content will decrease, but we cannot say how fast and how that will come about.
The next question is, the group's cash and cash equivalents is large and the cash flow is good, while the share redemption amount to shareholder is kept the same. Have you discussed a revision of the dividend policy, for example, that a certain percentage of earnings to be distributed?
A thing I cannot comment upon is a discussion, of course, held in the board for every new year. But the current level is what we kept for several years.
And the next question, who are your main competitors?
Of course, that's very, very different in the different areas. We have also a situation where it varies between countries. In the US, there are a couple of competitors that are good. We have a company called Change. We have the large companies like Philips, who acquired a company called Carestream. We have a company called Visage that we compete with in the higher end, but only in the US, but we are international. In Europe, there are very often local players in the local markets, and in different places in DACH, in Germany, for instance, than what we see in the UK, etc.
And then the final questions. When you look at the future, how much demand do you see for your products and why?
As we said before, we have by intent and planning and decided to work in markets where the market itself will grow by external force. There is no way that cybersecurity will not grow. It has to grow because we're getting more and more digitized in the society, and the cyber criminality is going up. And then the people working against that cyber criminality, that of course will increase a market. Then we need to keep or increase our market share in that growing market. In medical, it's mainly the situation that we need to curb or limit the growth of healthcare expenditure as percentage of GDP in the entire world. It cannot continue. These derivatives of these curves have to be kind of leveled off. We can't use all resource available on the planet to healthcare. And that change will require a lot of improvements in efficiency and workflows and how you work with healthcare. That's also a market that has to grow by external force. And the main impact of that external force is actually the demographics, where people get older and older all over the world, and old people have more disease, and you need to work with that.
Okay, that was the last question.
All right, then thank you very much for your questions. Please also give feedback on the way we do this now. We have done it over Teams, and we of course would like to know if it's better, worse, or the same as we've done before. We thank you very much for today, and looking forward to hear you again in Q3. Goodbye.